Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, just where we get our space sorted. Tonight's topic is going to be our PFI contracts plunging schools into crisis. And we're going to be joined by Brent Poland and Adam Spence just to get that conversation started. Now, I'm just going to connect. Brent, can you hear me?
Can, my friend. Good evening.
And I can hear you coming through loud and clear. So I'm going to add you as a co-host and step into the background again.
Oh, no, before you go, two things.
Go on.
Good luck on Saturday. I think there's more odds to say that the odds of Wales winning in Ireland are as good as the Conservative Party winning an outright majority in the next election. So that's not good. And I'm looking forward to your show on 4th of March, I believe it is, with good Dr. Fisher. Is that right?
Yeah, it should be a really, really interesting one. Some really interesting takes there and some stuff to delve into, but a different perspective maybe on education from someone outside the profession.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of conversation going back and forward with the good doctor, causing a bit of controversy within the profession. But that's the thing, is it's okay to listen to different perspectives from people. And I'm actually I've got married to a clinical psychologist, so I often have those conversations from my own practice versus the perfect world of what my wife would want and what you have in a classroom situation. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. So well done on Snatch, and I think is a really good guest, which should generate, I think, some really good traffic and good discussion as well. So
Definitely.
Look forward to that.
Right, I'll step back and leave you guys to it.
Well, good evening. I think Adam's in the house. Sorry if my voice is a little croaky. I've had one of those half terms from hell. My plasma television is now not working. What do you do with two children half term? Do outside things, except it's obviously been raining like cats and dogs. We've got flooding. My voice is gone. I've had the week-long lurgy. Sent the children and the wife down to Alton Towers while I lay in bed for 2 days. So yeah, I'm really enjoying half term. The next time somebody says to us about teachers getting these holidays off, I'm going to remind them that maybe my body was telling me that I needed a break, and I'm a bit broken. I wonder how many of us, that's just showing that, I wonder how many of us have had the first week of the summer holidays, the first week of Christmas, or they spent a significant time on half term with your body just going and stop. And I think that's just what happened. So yeah, so it's been one of those weeks where I actually don't mind going back into school and get myself back into routine. So Adam, got a good one tonight.
Yeah, sorry, Brent. I was just distracted by my mobile phone.
Oh, were you distracted by a mobile phone?
What's
interesting at that is that I did a bit of research into our school policy, because I remember I was involved in our school policy and mobile phones back when I was a school governor. First stint as a school governor. Would you like to know what year we come up with our mobile phone policy?
Let me think. 2012?
Nope. The first mass-produced iPhone was 2007.
Okay.
And me being me, because I was PHSE coordinator back then, I was pretty much on the ball, ahead of the curve in a lot of things, as a young professional, as you were back in those days, trying to look at the latest trends. And our policy was dated December 2008 was the first time we had a specific policy which indicated that mobile phones were to be banned, including smart devices, and that they weren't allowed out in lessons, and they weren't to be used during break and lunchtime. And it was because, ironically, there was one incident where somebody had recorded something, and that's sort of the point I'd made as well. What's the point in us having filters and proxy server filters in schools when the network is filtered, when the children can have anything in those mobile phones? And straight away, I remember my deputy head who just turned around and said this to me, and it's stuck with me. It's not our business for this stuff outside school. And that was the head of pastoral care in 2008. It was like, it's not our business what they do in these phones or the internet or social media, and how that's changed in the last 13, 14 years. But it's interesting that 2008 is when we formulated a policy. 2024 was when the government finally turned around and said, yeah, maybe mobile phones in the classroom are a bad idea. I note in their whole policy, not one mention of any other smart devices. They've just said, smartphones. They haven't even mentioned smartwatches. So I'd love to know who's doing their 9-page, non-statutory advice, because quite clearly they have basically already behind and out of date before it's even been published. Well, it's 14 years out of date for my money, but there we go.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a clear kind of distraction policy, but yeah, I think my joke at the start was about as funny as the government response to it. And if you saw the Rishi Sunak video online message about it, where he kept getting distracted by different messages. It's interesting. I did think there was kind of an irony with seeing all those WhatsApp messages coming through, and they seem to kind of struggle to find any WhatsApp messages.
Have you ever seen House of the Parliament?
Yeah. I've seen that video where I've seen that picture
Where they're
where
checking out hot tractors again. Massey Ferguson's and Zedders. Ooh, we've got a John Deere in here. Ooh, I'm going down a very dark avenue, aren't I? I'm taking myself down a very dark avenue.
Just to make everyone aware, there will be massive balance today because we are going to be critical of Labour as well as we go into the PFI contract.
All sides are getting it tonight because, let's be honest with you, all sides have just presided over.
Yeah,
I'll
just inform the listeners, Brent, that you called me about 15 minutes ago, all het up, and I told you basically to calm down and save yourself for the podcast. Should we just say a quick hello to John Catt, Brent? Because
hello, John Catt.
Hello, John Catt. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Please use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles and advance your personal developments. Happy reading. And just while we're just doing kind of ads, you want just to give everyone a heads up, Brent, on next week's show?
Yeah, next week's show, what I want to do is it's been leading towards this for a while. I've been sort of waiting for this one to get that critical mass. And it's starting to hit that critical mass because the pay and conditions, the review body haven't done their homework, and the unions are starting to build momentum towards calling for another strike. And it's interesting, it's not just the NEU, the NASUWT are both indicatively balloting. Ironically, the NASUWT have been since September doing action short of strike action, which has had more effect than a chocolate fire guard, let's be frankly honest with you. Look, I've expressed my views on this before. There's more to this than paying conditions. And I just can't for the life of me think, here we go again. It's just deja vu, and it's almost as if the guys in charge are either incompetent or they just want to fight, and the unions, whether they want to fight, I don't know. But here we go again.
It's certainly agitation, isn't it? It definitely feels like an agitation move.
It's an escalate. It's just an escalation again. It's just going back round again. And the thing is, yes, inflation has come down to 4%, and we are now technically in a recession. And they could say, well, you got 6% pay rise. Well, that's not exactly true because, when inflation was 10, 11%, we were getting 3 to 4%. So the numbers just don't add up. And with the recruitment retention crisis, I mean, paying conditions is there, but there's also something else going on which is connected to this week, and that's budget as well. I mean, because that's the thing we said about any pay rise has to be ring fenced as extra money rather than coming out of budgets. And tonight, what we're going to look at is the timeline of PFI, and just another example of where the money's going in schools. They always say to me when I started campaigning a long time ago, follow the money. Just follow the money, and you will find where things are going. And literally the PFI scandal, and fair play to Bronwyn Jeffries and Tom had a really, really good interview with her last week. It was well worth a listen back on anywhere we get Teachers Talk Radio and Spotify, Podbean, and it's worth a listen to for other reasons as well. But But it was on the back of the timing was very impeccable of getting Bronwyn on talking about PFI scandal. But it was more than just that as well. She's got a wealth of experience of reporting in educational matters. And let's be honest, educational matters, where do we start at the moment? There's just so many things going on. It's practically in the news every day, education. There's always, when I listen to national radio, they have like 3 topics. Education seems to be up there. And things keep coming around. Like, how many times have we talked about mobile phones? How many times have we talked about behaviour? How many times have we talked about recruitment, retention? It's just a constant, like a month goes by, free school meals comes up. We've got like a news cycle of like 10 items, send crisis. They just keep coming around, don't they? And nothing seems to sort of get done, except the situation seems to get worse and more evidence seems to be presented, which is interesting because the critical mass hasn't reached yet. I don't know where the breaking point is. At what stage does the breaking point come? Where do the wheels come off? I don't know. But what was interesting, what Brandon was saying was that the PFI scandal was the non-disclosure agreements, that it's
Yeah.
difficult to get the evidence because these non-disclosure agreements were signed by the companies going into, by the councils and by the governors of schools, which tied them, and getting evidence to come forward was difficult because you're trying to get the evidence and people don't want to whistleblow, or their hands are tied. I've come across these non-disclosure agreements before when I was working in my local community against high-speed rail, HS2, which was coming through Long Eaton, my local area, and it was disgusting how the local councillors off the record were saying to me, please campaign, please, please. On the record, they couldn't do nothing. Their hands were tied. They were broken people because they seen what hammer was coming down, and they were hamstrung. They couldn't do anything to stop it because they were basically tied into it. So I think this is a horrible thing, in non-disclosure agreement, because people can't do the thing that in democracy you want, which is the freedom to speak out. And I think there's something about this whole PFI scandal for me is a democratic deficit, and it stinks to the high heavens in a sense of how we've lost control over our schools, how head teachers have lost control over their schools, how local people have lost control over their own schools, and how it's just now being semi-privatized. And what we'll do tonight is at about 8 o'clock, we'll go through the timeline. I want to go through from 2003, the start of the PFI, sort of like the great fanfare of it's the savior, it's going to rebuild our schools, to then 10 years ago, the warning started to happen, to 5 and 6 years ago, when people were going, hold on a second here, we're paying out a fortune to these companies, and they're sending the money off the tax havens, to obviously recently now, we've had some final sort of fight back where people have said, forget your non-disclosure agreement, this is enough, we've had enough. So it's definitely reached that critical mass. But it's interesting. I did a lot of research today, I had some time today, and I went through and I found a lot of local news stories from newspapers in Blackburn and Burnley, Hull, Yorkshire, North, the Red Wall areas, funny enough, with a few exceptions. And they were warning about, this school is in trouble because it's paying out this school is falling down. We had a great Teachers Talk Radio last year. I think it was Tom had a guest on who was from a newly built school, and he was saying he would have preferred his old rundown school because half the school building was unfit for purpose and the contract was terrible. So it is out there. It has been. It's another one of those stories that's not come out of nowhere. It's just been slow burning. Like asbestos has been slow burning. Like air quality in schools is slow burning. Like the rack crisis. That was 4 or 5 years before somebody sort of pushed the button and went, seriously, are these things safe? So there's always these issues that slowly burn, and then all of a sudden some media picks it up, and then it goes away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And our job, I suppose, what we're trying to do is
Unfortunately,
make sure we don't.
that's the new cycle, isn't it? I guess it's our job to kind of hold the education stuff. So I think the plan is to kind of let the room fill up tonight, isn't it? So we can get a kind of good chat on PFI, because I'm sure people have got kind of their own stories. So we just whiz through some stories from all around the country.
Yeah, a couple of select stories.
Yeah. So do you want to start with Sadiq Khan down in London? And
Sadiq Khan, much controversial as he is, has confirmed that air filters will be installed in 200 London schools as part of a trial for worth 2.7 million to see whether they can be provided for every school in the capital. He said the scheme would need to help make progress and even further faster reducing impacts of toxic air. A bit late considering what happened during COVID. I know that Germany they put filters and they put stuff in their schools in I think December 2020, only a couple of months into COVID. New York did that. So
we had a show, didn't we? One of our first
one of our first was where Karim Bales was on, and Karim is one of
He
those.
talked about Holland, wasn't it? And the
Yeah.
Dutch schools, and they
Yeah.
were doing it way back then. So we're kind of way off. It's good that it's happening, but it's way off.
Well, here's me. Why am I probably lurgied at the moment? I'm probably lurgied at the moment because I'm in a school, and schools are high impact, high contagious environments. You to ask any NQT what go into the first 2 or 3 years of teaching, and you pick up everything, don't you? You have to build up your immunity. Nurses is the same, isn't it? There's certain professions that you come into contact with a lot of people, and I think teaching I think is second to any other profession out there for long COVID. I've
Mm.
got colleagues of mine with long COVID. So it's about time. And again, much like Can has done the free school meals, I know he's got his critics. I'm always a big fan of him, but there's two things he's done with schools that I think others maybe need to have a look at. And one was the free school meals, and the other was
Right,
the
Brent,
trial for the air filters.
interject a second.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't watched the ITV drama Breathtaking, it's incredible. The again, ITV have done a great job, a bit like with the Post Office, and I don't
Mm.
think that's kind of the way forward. And someone did joke that I don't think it's kind of like dark humor, that maybe they should start doing ITV should do a drama on the SEND crisis in schools, because that's the only way kind of government kind of start listening, or the public seems to start listening once there is a kind of ITV drama on something. But
Oh,
yeah, it
when you
seems,
listen to those phone-ins to some of the
yeah,
parents and some of the children and some of the, we all know some children who are really suffering, some parents are really suffering, and it's the ones without the cultural capital. It's the
yeah.
ones who just don't have, and that's the problem with school and education now. It's whoever shouts the loudest sometimes gets, and that's not fair. I mean, I'm a big believer in equality and social justice and fairness, and what's happening to some families at the moment with regards to their educational provision. It's not fair. But here's the thing: I want to be angry at local authorities, but I also know I've got friends who work in local authorities, and they're telling me they're in debt. They're going under. They are really facing Hobson's choices, and again, it's easy to sort of blame the people, and it's a blame culture we have. But there just isn't enough resources. And it goes back to what we're going to talk later on about. Is there enough resources? There is enough resources. They're just being squandered, wasted, and misappropriated. And
I think
people,
that's starting to. So we kind of suggested that with some of the kind of pay issues, or there's no money for pay.
yeah,
You
there's
know,
money for CEOs pay. I'll tell you that.
there seems to be kind of well, there has to be, and there will have to be money for interest for PFI companies, because
Well, there's
there's
money for consultants to come in and tell you how to interpret the will of an organization like Ofsted. I always, I think we've often felt guilty that we're taking money from the hands of the children, and it's not fair that we should ever feel that way. But I go back to 2010 when we were all told we're all in this together. We'll have to tighten our budgets, right? Right. Some of us tightened our budgets, and some of us haven't. Teaching profession hasn't. We're constantly bottom of the queue when it comes to pay and earnings. I've said before, this whole idea of 30,000 pounds, brilliant for a starting salary for a new teacher. That's 6 grand lower in real terms than when I started on, and they're crowing about that as if that's a good thing. And as I said before, I come into teaching with less than 10 grand debt. The kind of coming in now is 50 to 60 grand in debt, and in real terms, that's nearly 1.5 times more than in real terms to me. That's ridiculous. And then the mortgages don't. Oh, seriously, don't. So we'll go to another one. Reform of GCSEs is essential. We know that. So the head of the House of Lords, Lord Johnson of Marylebone, and he's the Lord Select Committee in 1116 of Education, says the national curriculum in schools in 2010 imposed is too limited and overstuffed. Tell me about it as a history teacher. Anyone of us tell us that we don't have an overstuffed and too limited curriculum, which just isn't going to meet the needs of digital future or equally the children of the future.
no.
And the baccalaureate, he's saying again, the baccalaureate has ultimately failed. He says, quote unquote, the government's attempt to recreate a 1950s curriculum. Let's correct that. The government's attempt to recreate a 1950s curriculum. I think we know what individual within the government was trying to create that 1950s curriculum has not helped many disadvantaged children, noting a quarter of disadvantaged children failed to reach grade 5 or above in
Yeah.
GCSEs and maths.
Well,
Absolutely.
it's been
Yeah.
a fascinating week for me because we've had students come to visit us who've been with me kind of all week from Milan, and I've kind of been talking to them about their education, and they've moved away from some of the things that we kind of think as modern advancements in our curriculum, such as like computer science and digital skills and that type of thing, because they kind of move in with the kind of future. They do computer science and things like that, but almost as like a philosophy. So they're looking at it from a kind of ethical and moral point of view rather than like just fitting their coding. So that kind of knowledge-based curriculum that we have has seemingly in Italy been kind of they've moved on from that and they're looking at things like we should be doing, which is like almost like critical thought,
Well,
which
you
will
tell me
grow
the
the next
technology I'm
generation.
teaching the children now is not
Mm.
going to be there by the time they're in employment. So what are we teaching them? Why are we teaching them? I say it again. Why are Ofsted inspecting me and underlining my date and title? I'm refusing. I'm done with it now. I don't care what my book looks like because you know what? What the what what is it going to do to a child's future if it knows how to write a title in an exercise book? Oh, come on! It's Victorian. That's absolutely borderline ridiculous. No wonder we've got children who are switched off. Okay, underline your title, underline your date in your 20th century exercise book. In an exercise, I mean, and this is get to secondary school. Kids shouldn't be using exercise books in secondary school. Are you we're having a laugh? We may as well get the blackboard out. We may as well get the TV out and start wheeling the TV in with David Attenborough. I mean, serious to goodness. What kind of country are we running here? The sixth wealthiest country in the world. South Korea was switching the kids to digital learning in 2010. 2010, we're 14 years behind South Korea, who are overtaking British economy in the next 2 years. And their education system is way ahead of ours. Absolutely. Where are we going backwards? Estonia is about to overtake us. Oh, seriously, where are we going with that? So yeah, GCSE is the only country in Western Europe which examines children at 16, which is a legacy of the historical reason that children left school at 16 and went into further education and went into training. That's 20th century. We're still hanging on to some sort of 20th century idea that kids leave school at 16. They don't. They don't leave school at 16. So why do we examine them at 16 and why do we examine them again at 18? To have one examination when they're 17 or 18, scrap GCSEs completely. Get done with them. Because some of it's not fair. It's not fair. Some of the children are not ready. Some of those 15-year-old boys, you're joking. Take a 15-year-old boy versus a 16-year-old girl. In maturation level, to get your Piaget involved in that and tell me that's a fair fight. Of course
Yeah,
it's not. Of course it's
yeah,
not. And then they're wondering why girls are doing better than boys. Of course they are. The brain development's further on ahead. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I can tell you I know brain development. I've read enough about it, and it tells me quite simply that children develop at different rates, and therefore, why we examine them, we're rewiring their brain at 14, and then we're examining them a year later. What absolutely bonkers. It's the worst time in their life to get them re-examined. And what we're having to do is shackle them into a GCSE exam system, which basically is knowledge heavy in a world that's moving beyond knowledge and into a acquisition of knowledge and critical thinking of knowledge. And what are we doing? Cramming their heads full of information. No wonder they're saying to us, what's the point of this? They're not, the kids are clever, they get it. I mean, what was I wasn't taught about the internet at school. I always said to the kids, who taught them how to do Scratch? The other day I had a computers lesson and I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. I winged it. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm looking at the lesson going, what the heck? What's Scratch? So got on this web this application. I thought, oh my god, where's the PowerPoint? Let me stick to the PowerPoint. Nothing on the PowerPoint. Okay. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll turn it back on the kids. I'll let them be the experts. It worked. They were teaching me after 20 minutes. I picked it up. And kids were going to me, sir, how do you do this and how do you do that? I'm going, I don't know, you tell me. And they were like, but you're the teacher. And I went, you tell me, you're teaching me here. Who's used Scratch? Three-quarters of kids put their hands up and they've done it at primary school. They do it in their own time. I'm like, fantastic. They're teaching me, their computers teacher, who isn't a computers teacher, who's never taught computers before, because we've got no computers teachers. And why are we doing it anyway? Oh, it was just one of those moments when I thought, this is just get out of control here. And somebody comes in and inspects me and says, how good was your computers lesson? Oh, it was fantastic. Kids did a lot of learning. Yeah, of course they did. Nothing to do with my teaching. It got to do with their learning. It had to do with their learning outside school. Didn't have to go to school to do that with me. In fact, the machines they're working on and the school building that they're in was way below the standard. And that's something that's interesting. When I was a kid, the one computer at school, the BBC computer that sat in my primary school, was like something out of Doctor Who. It was like, wow. And I remember going to secondary school and the first ever computers I saw in secondary school, remember word processing for the first time with one hand. And that was like, wow. First ever Excel I used. 1994, 95, first ever version of Excel. I made a graph for the first time. It was like, wow, man discovered fire. It was like the monkey thing in 2001 Space Odyssey. I was banging on the old bones were going everywhere and man had invented fire. Amazing. First started uni in 96, right? I was handwriting my first essays in 96. By 99, they were all word processed. And little did I know I'd go into teaching 20 years and still be getting kids to handwrite in
Yeah.
secondary school. Well, as soon as they leave secondary school, what are they going to do? Hand up their essays? What? Are they going to handwrite their essays at college? Are they going to handwrite their essays at uni? Are they going to handwrite their work over to their boss? Here you go. Here's a handwritten report, sir. They'd be laughed out of the job.
Yeah, well, I know we went through a lot of stuff about AI today as well, and I know that Tom has had a play with the text to video content and shared the video there. But I can tell you now, as a history teacher, Brent, you will be able to prompt AI to create you like a scene from a particular historical area.
Sora.
You'll be able,
Scary.
sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll be able to show that in the classroom. And we were talking about it, and a couple of the kids are kind of, as we were talking about it, we're like even looking at me going, "Oh, we've already done this," and just a few of them got their phones out and kind of showed me a couple of clips that they had already kind of put together or were playing with some kind of drone footage going over a kind of mountain scene. So again, and after that, that was just like form time. I then go into my next lesson, and it's like, right, we're back to kind of almost like chalk and talk, which is it's a bizarre kind of juxtaposition sometimes between kind of what's going on in the real world, and it's like, right, let's get back to what we're doing today, which is very almost back
There's a
to
disconnect between the learning and the relevance and the actual practicality of it. And
yeah
yes, we've always had that. Don't get me wrong. I used to joke with maths teachers and go like, I'm not going to need algebra when I walk into the shop. And my maths teacher used to turn in I used to like, why do I have to can I not use the calculator, sir? You won't walk around with a calculator in your pocket when you're older. Yeah, you do. I've got a mobile phone in my pocket that's got a calculator. That one didn't go down. And don't get me wrong, there are things about, but then, yeah, as a maths teacher would tell you, and I'm not criticizing it, it's about the problem solving, it's about the brain development, it's about the ability to solve the problems, not the answer. It's important. Hence why all the maths teachers always drilled me about it's not the answer, Poland, they want to see, it's your working out. And I was like, why is it always the working out they want to see? Because I was one of those that just went straight to the answer, of course. I always went straight to the answer, and I used to get told off for it. But I didn't want to show the working out. I'd already done the working out in my head, but they wanted to see my method. And I get that because that's what we want to be seeing the kids. We want to see their method. That's why coursework, and I'm going to say something controversial, I'd want to bring coursework back because with coursework, at least I can talk to the kids, see their learning, talk them through their learning, and I used to love that when I'd see the kids produce some work and then they're like, okay, try this instead. But right, me, my art and DT lessons when I was a kid, when you're creating something, I think there's nothing more brilliant when you're watching kids create something. That's something I saw the other day when they were doing Scratch in computers. It was fun watching them create their animations. And of course, on the screen was me doing my animations. And at one stage, one of the kids looked at me and went, "You're enjoying this, Mr. Poland?" And I went, "I am very much enjoing this." And I literally, because I was playing with the sound effects and I found one sound effect. And it was a fart noise. So I made it sound. I had them in hysterics and they just looked at me and I'm going, "This is absolutely fun. I love this." And from
yeah
the start, I went in and thought, I can't do this. I can't have to wing this. By the end of the lesson, they walked out quite happy because they had learned something. And one of the things is that I matched up the children who didn't know about Scratch, but kids who did. And I sat back and looked and thought, wow, look at they're teaching each other about it. But that happened because I've got experience and enough confidence to be able to say, all right, admit that I can turn it around like that. Again, I don't know, maybe people be able to do something like that, or in schools where they have prescriptive
I
lessons, or they'd worry
just
about off. Would they worry about what could they do that,
yeah
or
talk
would they
talk
worry that will they get into trouble for that?
talk about having fun. I mean, I'll have a little listen just in case it's really bad, but I had a quick go on Suno AI before you came on,
Yeah,
and it's like an AI app to make kind of pop songs. So my prompt is create a hip hop song about a talk radio star, Brent Poland. So I'll see. I'm just looking at the lyrics now. The chorus it's come up with is turn up the radio, feel the rhythm flow, be Poland bringing the energy, yo. He's the talk radio star, the one we all admire. Listen up, world, because he's set to inspire. Oh yeah. So I'll listen. I'll have a listen to that and see if it lives up to the lyrics. But
Why
that's
do I
a
get 1990s Run DMC to that back in tune to that? That's
well,
like that sounds like some sort of 1990.
it,
It's like that, but that's the way. Put that to that. What do you call it? Master Chief. What do you call it? 1997. I love that. It's like that, but that's the way it is. So, couple of other quick ones. Knife crime among teenagers risen by 20% in the last decade. I'm blaming that on school rules. So there's been a 20% increase in cases of 10 to 17-year-olds caught with threatening people with blades, according to the Ministry of Justice. However, the number of teenagers being jailed for these offences has dropped to 12% compared to 10 years ago. So we have more caught with knives and a 12% less conviction rate. Right. The average sentence length for those who were jailed decreased by 20%. So let's get those numbers. 20% increase in the number of cases reported of people being threatened with knives, 10 to 17-year-old. However, 12% reduction in those convictions and 20% decrease in the amount of time that they get for them. The figures come amidst concerns of an epidemic among youth violence on the streets. Patrick Green, CEO of the Ben Kinsella Trust, called for a 10-year strategy to tackle youth knife crime. Yeah, we've it's on the rise. On the whole, ironically, children are less aggressive and violent than they used to be. And I've said we've discussed this before. That I think it was about the likes of lead and petrol was one of the things with theories about lead and petrol in the 1970s, 80s,
yeah,
90s that
and we
you
did a
had.
show about that, didn't we? We had
Yeah,
that data. So if you listen back, there's a podcast on kind of
yeah.
behaviours that we kind of did.
But like everything else, the more extreme it become more extreme. That's my hypothesis on this. Our more extreme children are more extreme. Our bulk of our kids haven't changed in many ways. In fact, I think they've gone more introvert. We saw that during lockdown. Any generation, I mean, seriously, any generation that wanted to sit out lockdown, they just sat in their rooms and played TikTok and computer games. My generation would have been climbing up the walls if we were locked down the way they were locked down. Fair play to them. I think when a lot of people go on and say how much the kids suffered, I don't think they did. Really? They got everything they wanted. They got food in their bedroom. They got more pasta and toilet roll. You could shake a stick. That's all they needed. Just pasta and computer games, and that got them through. God bless them. So the rest of us had to put up with everything else that was going on. But this one's an interesting one as well, and this again is again on the rise. The number of cases of children suspended for sexual conduct, over 6,000 cases reported. Even primary schools have seen a rise in suspensions for sexual misconduct. So we're seeing children present in sexual ways, more sexual disturbing behaviour, and it sparked a debate over children's exposure to online sexual imagery. So again, that social media changes in society, or hey, you could probably put that down to school rules as well. Possibly kids rebelling against having their shirts tucked in. I shouldn't trivialize it, but these are the things that we're sometimes accused of. Is the kids are rebelling against school rules, when in fact we're seeing an increase in more extreme behaviours with a small minority, but these are more extreme than we've come across. More extreme sexual reporting of misconduct, more extreme knife crime and violence, and there's a definite trend there with the sort of the individuals, the more extreme end that are presenting to us, and again the lack of SEND support, the lack of local authority support, the lack of mental health waiting lists. This is your sort of wraparound care that we have become basically. Let's be honest with you, we are now frontline services, aren't we? Really, I know my bingo comes up with my phrase about the fourth emergency service, but that's the truth of the matter. We are seeing behaviors we've never seen before, and the simple answer from some psychologists is that schools aggressive policies is fueling that. I don't disagree that some schools go too far. I agree that I don't shout as much as I used to do at children, and I have regulated my behavior, and I think there's definitely something in the merit of regulating your own behavior as a teacher and then changing the children's behavior. I think that's true to a certain extent. But how can I regulate a child's behavior who's presenting in extremely sexual ways, or is holding a knife? What am I meant to do? Sort of like to that situation. And this is happening a lot more to teachers being attacked, and even seriously attacked. And what do we do with that when we come across that? Your natural reaction, and my natural reaction is to to try and regulate and control that environment to make sure that those behaviours are safer. And that's a natural human, I think that's a natural human instinct, isn't it, to try and regulate and control for the safety of the majority of the other children. And some people may say that's fueling, some children with likes of ADHD and neurodivergent. I disagree. As someone who has neurodivergent tendencies, I like routine. I like consistency. I actually have routine and consistency in my own teaching practice, and I have for a long, long time, because it makes me feel safe, and it makes a lot of the children who have got neurodivergence seem a lot safer in my classroom, because it's an ordered, structured classroom where there is a locus of control. But I relax once the control is there. I can relax with the children because I've got built up a relationship. There's a way of doing it. I've been firm and fair. It's the old thing of being firm and fair. You need some structured discipline there. You need some consequences, but you shouldn't threaten the kids, and you shouldn't have to bully them, or you shouldn't have to use guilt or shame. There's somewhere in the middle, I think, and Nathan will tease this out in his show, I think, in the next couple of weeks with the good Dr. Fisher. But there's something somewhere in the middle we have to find. I think the porridge moment, or the Goldilocks sweet spot. We're not too hard, not too soft, not too easy, not too difficult. It's getting it right, and I think that changes from school to school. But there we are, more cases of sexual misconduct for children as young as 4 with disturbing behaviour. For children as young as 4. That's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, the room's filling up, so we can get to our main topic. Should we say, you want to say hello?
Say hello to the cat.
Yeah, hi, John. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles and advance your own personal development today. Do you want a quick blast of your AI song?
Go on.
Oh, it's not going to work now. I think I got a blast accidentally a minute ago, but let me just see if it kind of. Can you hear that?
All right, stop. Can we do a country and western version of that? Or actually, can we do a I'd like a country and western version, or an Irish version with some bagpipes. James Horner-esque. What? I always loved James Horner, the whole kind of like the guy that did the soundtrack to Titanic. I love that eerie. Or no, do it to the style of Hans Zimmer. I've always wanted my own Hans Zimmer soundtrack. Batman Return, Batman, Hans Zimmer's it. I play Hans Zimmer in class. Kids know the Hans Zimmer. Yeah, of course, I have to avoid the Pirates of the Caribbean. That sets them off into Captain Jack Sparrow moment. But the Hans Zimmer soundtrack is often played in the background of my class, along with Minecraft Sweden OSD. For some reason, that calms them right down into work mode. I suppose the thing is, the rhythms of their brain are it puts them into computer game mode, and that music in the background of computer games is done. Specifically, it's like Las Vegas casinos. Soothe, forget the time, and they focus. And really, I've discovered that Sweden OSD. Here's a little tip for you: Sweden OSD soundtrack. Put it on the background, very low level, and just nice noise level in the classroom. And for some reason, the kids just they don't focus on the music. It's a bit like the philosophy you get in supermarkets, where you don't notice the music, but you kind of notice the music, but the music's there to create the mood. So yes, if you could do the Hans Zimmer, that to Hans Zimmer, I'd be very impressed.
I'll set it off as we go, and we'll maybe get it towards the end of the show. But obviously we've got a kind of a serious challenge as well for you, Brent, which Tom Rogers has kind of put on for you. Is while we're kind of talking about lots of different political parties, you got to try and get the balance with sticking the Greens in there as well with this, so we get that kind of.
Absolutely, we're sanctimonious, and sometimes. Somebody said to me once, I was at a debate, and goes, "You can say anything you want, you'll always be opposition." And I thought, that suits me down to the ground. I'd rather be opposition than
I was going to say that maybe like an unfair thing of we'll just concentrate on the main parties.
Well, I mean, the next government will be formed most likely by a Labour government, and the previous government's been a Conservative. There's only been three political parties in the last 100 years who had government. Then the Liberals were in coalition, and the last time they had a government by themselves was in the 1920s, I think, early 1920s. David Lloyd George, I think. So we're at 100 years of just 2/3 of those have been Conservative governments, 1/3 Labour. Look, the thing of it is, yes, for be fair and balanced, and I have. But the PFI scandal, it does go beyond both political parties. And what's interesting is I've got a news story which is concerning a frontline Labour frontbencher who's got the fingers on the purse strings. And they were demanding, we'll get to that in a second, they were demanding more PFI at one stage. And this is what politicians do sometimes. They sort of, we call it gaslighting, but they say certain things in the pub, and then they sort of backtrack the other way around. And it's our job as Democrats, and that's, I don't mind being held to account to my own. I mean, I know Tom HB has often said that he's recorded everything I've said to be used against me. By all means, please do. I don't mind discussion and debate. That's what we want. We want a healthy discussion and debate, and more of it, the better, as long as it is honest, forthright, and people are accountable. Then that's good. But our current political situation is, when it comes to education, is one of basically nobody wants to talk. I don't know why. It's the same as the Ofsted thing. I think one of the good things about Teacher Talk Radio is it gives us the opportunity to have these discussions where I think sometimes our politicians are not wanting to be honest with us. And I think I had been on a national radio with Bridget Phillipson, and I asked her an honest question. And an honest question was, when are you going to rebuild schools like you did in 2007? And I congratulated her, on rebuilding, a lot of schools in 2007, which is ironic, what I'm going to say later on. And the answer I got was like 2 minutes of just spiel. And I went, sorry, could you answer the question? Are you or are you not going to rebuild schools? Because what's the difference? And again, I got another spiel. And even the presenter turned around and says, you haven't really answered the question there. So ask me any. I'm always the person who ask me any questions. I'll be honest. I'm part of a group who's currently rewriting Green Party policy on education, and there are lots of discussions because some individuals don't. I mean, I got told off this week for not being very green because of my feelings on discipline. Because I might come across as a little bit traditional, and I am unadvertently traditional when it comes to educating children, and I'm not going to apologise for that. I'm also a person of faith, which makes me a little bit conservative as well. So I often find a common ground on a lot of things. I was speaking to a conservative councillor last night after a council meeting, and I teach his child, and we were having a real good had a pint, and on 90% of the issues until we got to Europe and the economy, we were in complete agreement. I think a lot of us involved in education do want the same thing. I think even a lot of people in politics want to do the right thing. It's just we got to be honest about the conversations and that people are transparent. And what we're going to look at tonight is, I think, a story that has been slowly on the burn and slowly but surely should reach the point now where somebody within the political establishment should have picked this up. And I think the only reason why they haven't is because they're embarrassed, because they got this wrong. And we know they got it wrong on hospitals. That's well out in the public media. We know PFI scandal on hospitals. There's a general consensus within the public that PFI has hamstrung and caused a lot of budget constraints for hospitals. But unfortunately, no one has until recently. So Branwen was trying, obviously, to make that connection of, well, how have schools been impacted? Because the PFI scheme was also building public buildings, including schools. But surely then, if hospitals have been hamstrung and have had a lot of their budgets eaten into by PFI, that should have been an easy sort of thing for some journalists until Branwen came along to actually say and put this together. So no disrespect to the journalist fraternity, they really could have made more of this, because this story's been out there, but it's never made that traction. It's never been that big hoo-ha. And I suppose the reason might be is because the two political parties, if one political party had done this, then the other may turn around and, as opposition, and go, ha, you did that. But because I think that the whole political establishment for the last 20 years has bought into PFI or has done PFI, it's a bit embarrassing for both, and therefore there's an element of, ENU philosophy of stick our heads in the sand, and that's not fair. That's not right, because that's not current schools.
Why bother bringing it up? But one of the first articles you found, Brent, was this the schools built in Bradford.
Yes.
So it's a story you found back in 2003.
Yeah. So in 2003, This is the Telegraph and Argus in Bradford, Keighley, Ire Valley, Ekeley, Yorkshire. So it's a local Yorkshire newspaper, and they are breaking the story that many in Yorkshire are going to welcome the PFI scheme because it's going to build the new generation of schools, and that their schools were dilapidated, run down, and needed of repair, that's 21 years ago. So governors, so just go through the article. So first three schools, Bradford under the private finances will cost a total of 63 billion. It has emerged. Grammar school in Balton, Tong, and Buttershaw are three named as the top priority under the first year of the PFI scheme, and building work could start in 2006. Bradford Council was granted Pathfinder status by the government, which means detailed plans can be drawn up to improve the crumbling school buildings. Does it sound familiar? Under PFI, schools are built and run by a private partner and leased back to the authority. Now, of course, this predates the massive canonisation, which I am in under Labour, and then, of course, continued under the Conservatives. So it was local authorities that were tied into this, of course. Governors would lose control of part of their budget. The cash normally spent on maintaining buildings, and some school support staff would move to the private firm's payroll. So it's a semi-form of privatisation, isn't it? Private firms involved in PFI will recoup their investment through a contract to maintain the new buildings for 25 to 30 years. So they would gain their money back by charging for services. And that's how they would make their profit over a period of time, charging for the services. So they would invest in the school buildings, and they would, of course, get the money back. And that allows schools to offset, so much like you buy your car in a PFI, offset the initial building that you don't have the money up front, but you can pay over 25 to 30, like a mortgage, basically, isn't it? But we all know who wins in the mortgage, not the person paying the mortgage, it's the bank, doesn't it? So when you think about this is sort of like how banks operate, and it's not as if they haven't caused the 1929 Wall Street crash, the 2008 kind of banking crisis. What did he say? Who's that famous historian who said banks are more dangerous than standing armies? I think it was one of the American presidents. Anyhow, I have a serious issue with banks, the way banks operate, let's be honest, and a serious issue with PFI because they operate in the same sort of system as well. Because let's be honest, that means that they are going to take over that period of 25 to 30 years a small profit for the services they provide. But they have a contract, which in a contract, you have a legally binding contract. Both sides are in a relationship, same as your bank with your mortgage. You pay your mortgage, you don't get your house repossessed. Fantastic. There you go. The bank lends you the money, you pay your mortgage on time, everybody's happy. You get to buy a house over a period of time that you wouldn't be able to buy outright. There we go. So under the Pathfinder scheme, Bradford would be a leading edge of, Bradford would be at the leading edge of moves to develop the new model of the PFI scheme. So it was one of the first to go through this. A joint venture project involved in the council, the Department of Education, and Partnership UK's, and the private sector. So this is all positive. It's all positive. Wow, brand new initiative. Bradford leading edge. Of course, Red Wall C, the industrialised area of poverty, could do with new school buildings. Gift horse in that sense. This is what they're saying. The deal is likely to have major financial implications, though, for both Bradford Council and the schools concerned. Council members and governors will be required to approve the deal before it go ahead. So they did ask permission from council members and they did ask permission from governors. Leaders of all three schools, however, have welcomed the opportunity to have a purpose-built facilities alongside their current building. So, of course, the cherry was, look, yes, you're going to pay this over 25, 30 years, but hey, do you want your crumbly, old, terrible Victorian building, probably with, porta cabins from the 1970s out there, or would you want yourself a brand new school that you pay over 25 to 30 years? I think that's how that was sold, wasn't it? Some of the buildings in Buttershaw date back to the 1950s. The head teacher said the current buildings are awful, does not damage it damages the progress of the children. There's a 10-minute walk between some classrooms, and it's fantastic news. We're such a relief. We're also getting 1.2 million sports hall. Often children in places like this are given the worst facilities. This will make it better to learn. So this is all massively positive. Head teacher on board, brand new facilities, partnership between government, the Department of Education, this private company. Wow. You'd say to yourself, and in a poor deindustrialized area of the north, great. What wasn't the like? This is how PFI was sold. This is how it was brought in. A great initiative of rebuilding our schools and offsetting it for future generation. In theory, sounds okay, doesn't it?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
So we get to 2016 years ago.
Yeah, so we're into the source in Money Week, which I think is kind of a good one.
So this is Money Week, and so a publication, financial publication. What's wrong with PFI? They said, and this is 16 years ago. PFI was supposed to be the saviour of the public sector, but was costing the taxpayer a fortune and could prove to be a painful thorn in Gordon Brown's side. So we know where we are to Gordon Brown, not Blair any longer. So will private financial initiatives survive? They're questioning already 16 years ago. There's only a couple of years after Bradford. What are we doing these private initiatives? So PFI, the private initiative, is large-scale state spending. The idea came from the Tories, but is warmly embraced by New Labour, which sometimes prefer to talk about public-private partnerships. Under PFI, the government has signed more than 750 deals with private companies to build, services, and maintains all kinds of projects in the public sector, from schools, hospitals, and prisons to roads and even defence facilities. Right. So where to rebuild the public sector on an offset. So what was in it? It was good news for the private sector because PFI has become a booming £4 billion a year industry, involving money for upfront lucrative service contracts and predictable revenue stream for years. Let me say that again, a predictable revenue stream for years. And the revenue stream was, of course, going to come from, that's correct, school budgets.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So hold on, let me get that. Even then, it was no long, that money's going to come out of school budget. Now, of course, in 2016 years ago, we
Yeah.
hadn't had the sort of financial crash was about to happen. And everything was the financial situation was pretty rosy. The early 2000s weren't that bad financially. There was a boom years, wasn't it? We were having a good time back then. And it was just a natural global sort of economy was quite healthy.
Yeah.
And that was the situation then. They were warning. So what's in it for the state? This is more contentious. Supporters of PFI argue that it allows the state to access private capital and gives the private sector more confidence to get involved in government projects. It was certainly the reason taken up from the Labour Party in 97, and Blair's first health secretary, Alan Milburn, declared when he came in, arguing that it's PFI or bust. However, skeptics frequently argue that PFI is more than a gigantic accounting fiddle or hire purchase scheme, keeping current infrastructure spending off the government's current accounts and shifting it on to future generations. Hello, future generations. That
Well,
would
we're
be
here.
us.
We're here. We're here now. Hello, we're here.
We are the future generations. That's 16 years ago. So thanks very
Yeah.
much for that.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
Gordon Brown keeps his much
that's a whole.
vaunted
That's a whole.
reputation for.
That's a whole cohort, isn't it? Through from kind of birth to GCSE.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So this is 2 years before the government changes. This is just before, which is interesting about this article. It's
yeah.
literally just before the banking crisis of 2008, which again would have just scuppered everything. So in theory, nothing wrong with PFI, but in practice, the numbers haven't always quite added up for the taxpayer. Instead of private sector companies involved, the deals appear to be making spectacular profits, and the government is getting stuck and looking nasty looking payment commitments. So the private sector is making profits, and the government seems to be stuck holding the baby. For example, 54 billion has been spent on infrastructure and services under PFI, but these are the government's own figures. The long-term cost to the taxpayer of that 54 billion is going to be like more 160 billion. Right. What can we do with 160 billion with hospitals and schools when it comes to
Well, I
actually
wonder. I wonder what that figure stands at now. Like this
that
is
was
a
2000 and pre
yeah,
2008.
yeah. This is just a prediction. There's going to be a massive overspend,
I'd
isn't
say
it?
about 70% increase, so 160 billion. And I know this because that was the original cost for. I've always been working out from 2009 what the cost of HS2 was going to be, and we're talking about a 70%. So that was 70% of 1.6. That's about 250 billion quid then. So
Yeah,
and the rest.
yeah. But now those buildings now have got to now go through a kind of almost some of them we've seen on Brandwin's work about the fact that some of those buildings aren't even fit for
Fit for
purpose.
purpose.
So actually they've got now more maintenance to do on them. Do you know what I mean?
And the contracts are all basically not being honoured. So the contracts aren't being honoured in some schools. And yet, so you sort of say to yourself, all right, okay, it's a bit like your mortgage being too much for you, but you stick it out for 25 years and you've got your house at the end of it. At least you've got the house at the end. You've got something to show at the end of it.
Yeah.
Right, what happens if you buy the money pit? So basically, you've got a PFI and you've got Tom Hanks in the money pit. That's what you've got.
Yeah, you haven't
Culture
got a,
reference to the 1980s. There you go.
you haven't got a functioning asset anyway, have you? To kind
No,
of base any of this off. Do you know what I mean?
and the best part is you can't complain about it because you're tied into a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely tied in. So that's 2000. That was 2008. That was what they were warning about the PFI scheme. So here we are, 11 years ago, and 11 years ago, so we're now in the Conservative government, and Labour's in opposition. And you'd think at this stage, wouldn't you, that they would go, right, let's just distance ourselves from PFI. Let's just not PFI. Let's run a mile from this. Let's keep a low profile. So the first group of rundown schools to benefit from the government rebuild scheme has been announced after the contractor was appointed. So this is 11 years ago. 6 schools in the region were part of the phased priority investment, 3 in County Durham and 1 each in Stockton-on-Tees, Gateshead and Sunderland. You can see who I'm going with this. And yeah, if you know your politics, you know which politician is in that area. Schools are among 27 in the region told last May they received cash from a 2.4 priority school building programme. Those in urgent need of improvements include 5 of the 6 announced today will be fast tracked from the Department of Education. So, what type of investment were they calling for? The rest are rebuilt or refurbished through the Private Finance Initiative (PFI) scheme. But just last week, concerns were raised about the future of the projects. MP Bridget Phillipson called on the government to take action because PFI school projects in her Houghton and Sunderland South constituency were struggling to secure loans for the work. Let me just repeat that.
Yeah.
Bridget Phillipson is calling on the government to take action 11 years ago to get PFI school projects in her constituency actually built. This is after the financial crash and while she's in opposition and after the warnings about the PFI scheme. And there she still is for her own whatever you want to call it. And there's a smoking gun sitting there. If anybody, investigative journalist, wants to turn around and ask an awkward question to Bridget Phillipson and say, hello, Bridget Phillipson, any chance of telling us why you were still advocating for the building of PFI schools 11 years ago, when we all knew that they were very, very, very dangerous for schools to get looked into? Education Secretary Michael Gove pledged to investigate the hold-up, and criticism was followed today by the announcement of the contractor, who one of the biggest in the world, by the way, who won the contract to carry out the renovations in the northeast. In County Durham, the work will begin, and these academies, and I will work, and as it's going on a bit, Michael Gove, what he's talking about. So there we are, 11 years ago.
Yep.
Even then, still calling for more PFI and calling for PFI to be built in the constituency of now the current Chancellor, who, let's be honest with you, spoke to me on national radio and wouldn't pledge to build a single school when asked. So
Yeah.
I've had to turn around and say, hey, look, is there another PFI scheme down the line? What have you got up your sleeve? Are they going to try it again? Is this the only way out of this? Are the schools going to be rebuilt with RAC? Are they going to be rebuilt? Where's the money going to come from that? Because here's the big question. I said at the start of the show, follow the money. Follow the money. You follow the money, you follow the story. And there's a smoking gun sitting there and nobody's made the connection. Nobody's joined the dots up. And that's not personal to Bridget Phillipson. It's just the fact of the matter is she's the Chancellor at the moment and she's pledged nothing for schools should they get elected. And there she is for her own constituency, arguing 11 years ago that schools have to be built in her community. I think in America they call that the pork barrel politics, don't they? Looking after your own area, which is fair enough, but the constituency MP should be doing. Got a couple of messages coming in. Want you to reply? Adam's been there. Let's see.
Yes.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm just showing the links because it's fascinating, kind of following kind of chronologically through, isn't it?
Yes.
I think if anyone kind of then wants to kind of look at this in any more detail, it's kind of there as a kind of reference point.
So here we have 7 years ago, and 7 years ago, we've got a couple of stories now. We're going to get 7 years, 5 years, 6 years, 4 years. Parties face calls to buy out private contracts from schools and hospitals. So this is Scotland, because Scotland being a bit more. The trade union has called on parties to commit buying out contracts for privately financed schools and hospitals. Unison, which represents public sector workers, said the Scottish government should save 12 billion by buying out the contracts for a range of projects currently being paid off like a mortgage over 25 to 30 years. None of the parties has backed the call, but the SNP and Labour have committed to reviewing some or all of these schemes. I wonder how that review's going. The call follows an Edinburgh schools fiasco, which saw 17 privately financed buildings closed due to safety fears. Whoa. There's the rack. There it is 7 years ago in Scotland. 17 privately financed buildings were closed because the quality of the builds were not good enough because the building materials they were using weren't good enough. So there we are, 17 privately financed PFI buildings were closed due to safety fears in Edinburgh, and that was 7 years ago. Again, investigative journalists joined up the dots. Unison said that inefficiency of the contracts was a great concern, as the building quality and safety was as well. Taxpayers faced repayments amounting to a total of 35 billion. This is only for Scotland, by the way. Schools, hospitals and roads and prisons, waste disposal facilities and other projects built under PFI, or PPP as it was called, and the 2 new variants developed by the SNP government, who also bought into it, obviously. Oh my word. Oh, here we go. So they bought into it as well. And the bulk of that, around 31 billion, relates to earlier PFI and PP contracts through the 4 billion owed as a result of newer schemes set to grow as a Scottish Futures Trust, the government body which negotiates public-private deals. So here we have in Scotland that Labour, SNP, and obviously whoever's been, yeah, those two have been in government in Scotland, and they also bought into PFI or PPP. So the two of them, of course, why would they want to talk about it? Because there we are. They're being warned by unions that these buildings are A, unsafe, and B, they're locked into contracts which are bleeding the taxpayer dry of funds. And then they're actually saying and suggesting that it's cheaper in the long run to buy out, a bit like paying your mortgage early. That's basically what they're saying there. Is just, if you've got the money there, pay off your mortgage now so you don't have to pay the bank over a longer period of time. Which for me, my economics degree 101 there would probably seem like sound financial sort of business there, wouldn't you? Why stay in debt longer than you need to? 6 years ago.
Get it
And
done.
this is one you're going to have to hold me back. I'm going to go to John Cat after this one because this one's going to send me right off the edge. 5 firms avoided paying tax despite £2 billion worth of profits. BBC learns 2017. So there's 27th of October 2017 by Andrew Hoskin in The World Tonight, BBC Radio 4. Good old Radio 4. 5 offshore PFI companies paid little or no corporation tax during a 5-year period despite making profits of nearly £2 billion. The 5 companies specialise in lending money through private finance initiatives. Hello. They own hundreds of public assets, including schools, hospitals, and even police stations. Hiya. So the BBC has also learned, here we are, 2017, big story, and it's not really made the headlines until Brandon got Bresser. But there we are. There was the warning. Learned that a small number of big offshore companies are currently on a buying spree. They're buying up a number of UK public buildings. Hello, venture capitalism. Research carried out by the think tank that investigates PFI deals, the European Services Strategy Unit, probably don't have them any longer, reveals the extent of the buy-up in Britain. 9 offshore infrastructure funds owned between 50 and 100% of the equity in 335 PFI private schemes. This amounts to 45% of all the 735 current projects, offshore tax havens. And that means, let me put this straight, that UK taxpayers' money goes towards the school budget, and then the school is paying a contract, and the money for that contract isn't even going back into the UK economy. Off it goes to offshore, little probably, Cayman Islands or the 47 other places in the world where you can hide your money. I don't want to name them all, but quite a few of them are actually former British colonies and British dependencies, apart from Panama, where you seem to be able to hide quite a bit. 12 offshore companies have been bought equity of 74% of the current project. Education and health, including schools and hospitals, account for 2/3 of these purchases. Meg Hiller of Labour MP, who chairs the Public Accounts Select Committee, has told The World Tonight, frankly, it's shocking. Thank you, Meg Hiller. Our taxes are paying for our schools and hospitals, and yet these companies are clearly profiting for paying no tax. So fair play to Meg Hiller. There's the Public Accounts Select Committee. She blew the whistle on that, but she's the MP for Hackney South and expressed concern at the concentration of so many public assets in so few hands offshore. Completely agree with her. Nobody foresaw the sale of the debt onto companies and this conglomeration. So she's apologising there. Nobody saw that these companies would then be bought out by other companies and be offshored. We didn't see that pattern developing when it comes to our private utilities.
There's a
pattern there, isn't there? There's a very strange pattern that seems to repeat itself over and over again. Now we see so few companies owing such a large amount of debt. That's quite a big concern. I think we call that a monopoly, don't we? And I think we're at the stage where the Monopoly Board says the word mortgage, where we don't earn very much. She described the UK public assets as a cash cow, adding, now there's a very big gap between the owner of the debt and the service and the organisation paying for it. So we're in debt, we owe this money, and we're paying out these services to companies, and the money is being then filtered out overseas, not even staying in the UK. So that's UK taxpayers' money going towards schools and then filtering off into the ether. That's just what that is. Let me just repeat this. And again, nobody's picking up on this. Nobody. There we have. That's The World Tonight in BBC Radio 4. And I, for the life of me, cannot think that this should be one of the biggest scandals in education, as it was in health. Let's be honest. Everybody knows about PFI and health. Everybody knows about the hospitals in debt. Why aren't we seeing the same in schools? And that is, I'll give you the date, and you can put that story on link there. 27th of October 2017. That was BBC Radio 4, saying that the PFI scheme was money was being pilfered overseas. Offshore PFI funds made profits of £1.83 billion over a 5-year period from April 2015 to 2020, but paid little or no corporation tax. Okay, so I'm going to say our sponsor. You can say our sponsor while I just take a little drink and find my inner calm.
Calm down. Yeah, I mean that's well done, Brent, for spending your day kind of sifting through all that, because I think it gives a real insight into the kind of the chronology of events to where we are today. But just while Brent kind of composed himself, this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools all around the world. Have you checked their latest releases? You can use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. And we'd also kind of, like to promote Teacher Talk Radio while we're on it. If you are listening tonight and you're thinking of maybe a show yourself that you'd like to put together, or have an idea of mentioning something kind of live to an audience, either on Spaces or through our podcasts, and we've got kind of lots of kind of vehicles for this, and also YouTube with the Sunday show on Sunday morning. The weekly review. You can kind of get involved by visiting www.ttradio.org. And obviously make sure that you're following this show on Twitter and following the group. And and if you like what you hear, please feel free to kind of like and share the stuff that me and Brent put out. You can do that through the Spotify rating. Give us kind of a nice 5 stars. Obviously, it all helps kind of get us up those kind of charts and gives us good feedback if you like what you're hearing today.
Absolutely, and also please feel free to send some messages or interrupt my full flow. I'm on it this evening. I'm not even going to apologize for it, because I think this is one of those. The more I've delved into this, the more I've gone, oh dear God, and I'm not saying I'm shocked. I just think, why hasn't this been really flagged up? Because what's making me angry is to know in the same period of time how we've struggled for our pay conditions, how we struggled to meet ends meet. We are struggling in schools to meet ends meet. And money is being filtered out of UK schools and into offshore bank accounts. And seriously, nobody's sort of, nobody's bothered.
Yeah, but
I mean,
as you said,
I don't. It's really grinding my gears, this one. It is, because it's just so unfair. It's just not, and it's not just so unfair. And honestly, we're having to cope with the lack of resources in the 6th wealthiest country in the world, which basically has got buildings falling down, which basically cost us during COVID because they wouldn't put filters in it. I mean, you add up everything, free school meals. Think of all the things we could do with that money in education. Just the SEND. It's just immoral. It's wrong, and it's everything. For me, this story and this whole PFI thing, for me, perfectly encapsulates everything that's gone wrong in education in the last generation. And even goes to the fact that the people haven't held us accountable. They're more fixated in our policies of haircuts and school policies with socks and walking on corridors in silence. People are wound up by that. I mean, seriously, they know that their taxes are going overseas. They know that their children aren't getting every penny that should be going into schools. That's ridiculous. And here's the warning, right? But we'll continue. Lewisham schools liable for 30-year PFI bills. So here's an Essex newspaper in Lewisham, and their warning 5 years ago. This is so again, local newspapers, and it took a bit of trawling to find these today. And I did do a deep dive into local news stories to do a good search. Lewisham schools are still liable for private initiative bills from up to 30 years. For up to 30 years ago, adding further strain on already stretched budgets the borough schools forum heard. So PFI schools are paid and managed by private companies, but involve extra costs, including maintenance costs. The schools were introduced across the country in 1987, so they increased public sector. Several schools in the borough are PFI schools, with 14 schools projecting a funding shortfall for 2018-2019. Since 2018-2019, they were projecting a shortfall because of PFI. What situation are they in at the moment? No wonder we're hearing about schools of 80 to 90 kids in the classroom. No wonder we're hearing about redundancies. No wonder we're not recruiting retention. If that's the situation they were in 2018, 2019, God bless them. The Forum Chairwoman and Special School Representative said schools were liable for PFI bills for up to 30 years, and they had to be mindful of. We've got loads of PFI bills ranging back for a number of years. They can do it right up to 30 years, and there's nothing in the clause that you can go back from. And we have to pay it right up to 30 years. Um, Unexpected PFI bills can throw out a school's budget, according to the school representative. The issue with PFI claiming monies for 10 years ago hasn't gone, he told the Forum. So it basically back pay as well. PFI is one of the number of areas the local authority do really have helpful management services. What schools have been doing is trying to work out the overall impact of what retrospective claims on PFI providers will be. So this is PFI providers claiming for services. And we're going to come to that in a second, where there's, I think, one authority with £14 million worth of legal costs because they've taken the PFI provider to court. So it's £14 million come out of private, come out of taxpayers' money to fight a PFI provider who's not providing the actual services, and their contract broken their contract. Which is again what Branwen was talking about, wasn't it? This is where we're now getting to this point where the services that they're even charging aren't good enough, and the buildings that they built aren't good enough.
Yeah.
So for me is the salt rubbed into the wound. So that
Yeah,
was
it
Luke's
feels
from
that way, doesn't
council
it?
in 2018. Sorry, Adam.
No, yeah. I'm just trying. As you're going through this, it's kind of, I'm just kind of listening to this as a kind of like listener as you're kind of going through, and it's just all the things that we've talked about over the last months, all these kind of crises, all could have been potentially solved with money that is now essentially just leaving these schools' budgets into these contracts, and then the schools don't have the resources in the building anyway to fix the problems.
Not that I'm defending the government, but they'd
Mm,
have made a point, which in one aspect they would say is true from their perspective, that they have increased funding for schools
yeah,
and that there's a record amount of funding for schools. And we know that's a fallacy when you look at the school to pupil ratios.
mm.
But they would say from their outwards looking in, oh, yeah, we're giving all that money to schools. But have they realised where schools
Yeah.
are
It's
spending it in
literally
that
going.
regard?
It's going straight out to these contractors, isn't it?
But that's of course, but they're from their point of view, they're going nothing to do with us. That's pure gaslighting, isn't it? It's like they're taking no responsibility for that. I mean, the government that's going to come in, I'm sure Labour government's going to come in, and what are they going to do? They're not going to acknowledge that some schools are spending 20-25% of their budget servicing contracts that they signed. Some head teachers, oh my gosh, some head teachers are inheriting this. God bless these people. They probably go to a school and realize they open their books and go, yeah, I'm a head teacher of a new school. Fantastic. Let's look at my budget. What PFI scheme? Who signed that? This is like, a football manager taking over the football team that's bankrupt. I mean, I've got some Everton listeners here. I think you've got the Sean Dyche situation, God bless him. But that's not fair. It's just not fair. That's not fair in head teachers when they have to take over schools. And it's not fair in the current governing bodies of these schools. And as I say, these Bradford schools that were caught into this. And watch this. This is where I had to walk away earlier on when I read this one, when I put it all together. So the same Bradford schools in 2003, which welcomed it, which lorded it out and thought, wow, great, we've got these falling down schools, fantastic. Here we go, same Bradford schools. Pupils losing out on due to rising costs of PFI, according to school heads. Generation of school heads different. Bradford head teachers have spoken about the financial pressures they face due to PFI contracts. This was reported in July 2019. So between 2003 and 2019, 16 years later, the same area that was lorded out as being flagship and getting these PFI schemes and brand new builds, this is the reality. Public financial issues were used to fund building projects and were first brought in under Labour, popular under the Labour government, under the Tories and then Labour government. They involved projects being built in partnerships with public bodies. At a meeting of Bradford Schools Forum yesterday, members heard some of the problems caused by the contracts, which schools are locked in for 25 years. Bradford Council signed 2 PFI contracts across the district with 10 projects in 2 phases. And again, the same schools I mentioned earlier on are there. And there was a second phase in 2011, which included other schools. So there was 2 phases to this. And even in 2011, they were still going ahead with another fund. That means some of these schools in 2011 are locked into, what's it, 2036? Oh my God, it's got 12 more years. School bosses expressed a significant concern over government funding of special needs places in Bradford. Each contract runs for 25 years, including provision. So their special needs is being cut. Go through it very quickly. Oh, here's the interesting thing, and this is the crux of it. Members were told that the amount to be paid by the schools as part of the contract rises with the retail price index. So God bless them. Retail price index, let me remind me, 2 years ago and a year and a half ago went from 1% to 11%.
Yeah.
So what do you think their repayments on their PFI went? Correct. They're absolutely getting pummeled.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is before
It's a
the
huge.
massive inflation of the Ukraine crisis in the last 2
Yeah.
years. So what they must be in at the moment, absolutely, must be on their knees. This is before all of that. And this, again, I'll say the date on this. This is 2019.
Yeah.
So this is 2019. The
This is just
cost of
before.
the
Just
cost of
before.
7 mainstream secondary schools is 6.3 million, and the cost for 3 special schools charges 0.76 million. The meeting heard the contracts were signed during very difficult financial times. And the CEO of the trust said something unless changes with the PFI contracts and rising cost of repayments, then schools could face major financial problems. There he is, CEO of the trust, who's got the PFI in 2019, warning that if something doesn't change with these contracts, they may face major financial problems. This is before the financial crash, before COVID and the
Yeah.
financial crash.
Yeah. Just before
Oh
COVID.
God!
Yeah.
Oh my
Unbelievable.
God! And again, they're ringing the bell there. They're ringing the bell and they're saying, what? 5 years ago, they're ringing the bell saying, we are in trouble with PFI. 4 years ago, actually, nearly five now. So, that's where we're at.
Hmm.
And now where we're at is when Brandon went in and we saw, the flooded classrooms, the dodgy contracts. We've seen that story was repeated over and over again about the school forced to spend 470 grand on grass cutting. So that was they had to cut the grass never higher than 2.5 centimeters. And the school must pay the company for the PFI agreement. So that was one of the classic examples of you must maintain your grass to make sure that they get their contract. And they say that will rise more than £151,000 since 2021. So there it is. So this year it will rise. That idea of cutting that maintenance went from £470,000 and added another 151,000 since 2021. The contract, and this is interesting actually, and here she is again. The contract prevents the school from shopping around for better prices, which Potter described as incredibly frustrating. Meg Hiller, chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, again, this is her now. She warned about this 5 years ago. Did she not? She said it's
Yeah.
ridiculous, unacceptable. So no disrespect, Meg Keller, but what have you been doing the last 5 years? Where's the bell been rung? And I'm sure you have, but same person there mentioned the Public Accounts Committee 5 years ago is saying the same thing now. If there was more openness, public would be shocked many citizens and taxpayers. Completely agree with Meg Keller. Completely agree with you. If there's more openness, and she's a Labour MP, so fair play to her, breaking ranks there, but doing the right thing for the public. And she's saying it. The publicity would shock many citizens and taxpayers, and it might push the companies to think again. So she's actually screaming out and saying if the general public knew what was going on, maybe they would push back. And I think my theory of a lot of problems in schools is that parents are fighting schools and blaming us and throwing us under the bus. Well, they just get behind us and defend us
Yeah.
and actually save us from this. They are taxpayers, they're voters. This is the system. And I'm
Yes.
serious. I don't know why I come up the next general election. Maybe I'm biased. I am. Of course I am. A devil's advocate. Of course I am. I'm going into politics myself, and I am a teacher. So obviously I'm on that side of the fence. Well, come on, as a parent myself, if this was happening in my local primary school, are you telling me it happened in my local primary school? Do you think I'd be more worried about my child's, getting told off for a pair of socks, or the fact that my child's got no? I mean, come on, we're at that point. This is enough. It's got to be enough. This has got to be one of those things where we just go draw the line under it. And I'm going to say, I mean, talk about balance. Where are the unions on this? And
Yeah. Well,
I'm the one saying this. Where are the unions on this? There was Unison saying that in Scotland how many years ago?
mm,
Maybe the unions too close to certain political parties. I don't know, but honestly speaking, where's the whistleblowing on this? Where's apart from that news story? And again, that news story was broke the news for a day or two, and it's done. It's gone.
yeah.
It's done. It's finished.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know kind of how parents can get this information if you're just kind of outside of education. Maybe it'd be an interesting thing going forward if schools had to kind of, register their accounts as a public document more, so people can kind of see a bit more about kind of where money is going in a school.
But
Maybe
they want to admit again if they're hamstrung by signing into a contract, and they've got non-disclosure agreements, they can't disclose that.
Yeah, but
But I'm sure that some schools know. I mean,
that should never have been allowed to happen in a kind of public sphere, isn't it? Because the point is you've got to have kind of opency and transparency in those contracts.
you'd think in a democracy you would, but
Yeah.
here's the Public Accounts Committee 5 years ago saying it's an absolute disgrace. Here's the Public Accounts Committee saying Brownman Jeffries, as that news story, it's an absolute ridiculous and unacceptable. And if the public found out, oh, let me say again, she added, if there was more openness and the publicity would shock many citizens and taxpayers.
Mm.
Okay, it took me a few hours to find all those news stories, and there they are. It's out there. And I'm saying an hour and a half is what I spent putting this all together. you know, Investigative journalists, well done, Brandman, but where's the rest of them? In a democracy, we need our journalists and we need people to be holding the people in charge for account. And as I say, follow the money, and the money seems to be filtering out from UK schools to funding the lifestyles of the rich and famous in 47 tax havens around the world. So congratulations, schools are now the next latest sort of situation where our children's future is being pilfered away and sneakily hid in places where it can't be. And that's what's really hurting me the most about this is taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer myself.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
practically fund my own self. We are as teachers. So we're taxpayers. Forget that. And we pay our taxes. We know we pay our taxes, or so does any of the public sector. But this is public sector money that's just been taken out of the system. The government can like say, oh, we're pumping all this money in education. But the whole idea of our economy is you pump money in and you invest. I mean, you take investment, you're meant to invest, and that investment's meant to become sustainable. That's the government's red book. That's the idea of if you pump money in, that's the basis of economic development. You put money in and you grow a positive multiplier effect. If you build a new school, then that school community starts to benefit, don't you? They've got those sports facilities, they've got more confident kids. All of that can grow an area. What does Rishi Sunak says? And I agree with him. Education is the silver bullet that could solve a lot of problems in society. And here we have schools, 20% of their budget's going straight out the door, not even just staying. If it's going to UK contractors, absolutely, yeah, fine. But three-quarters of them is going to offshore bank accounts.
Yeah,
That's an absolute scandal.
yeah.
That is absolutely scandalous. I don't know. Maybe we raise the profile of this, or maybe I feel a campaign coming on. I don't know. But
Well, I
seriously,
think it's certainly kind of something we maybe kind of need to keep following, and we'll keep kind of agitating for everybody to try and kind of get a bit more kind of headwind on this. But it's certainly worth kind of it's an interesting question, why it hasn't been picked up in all those articles. Apart from one of the early ones you said, there doesn't seem to be kind of any union inputs at all on this. Even though
No, and nobody of that kind of,
one
I
of the
mean,
questions.
nobody seems to be, and you could say a non-disclosure agreement could account for some of that. But here's the thing: I parallel this with health, and yes, there is a definite public consciousness. We all know that one of my local hospitals is PFI, and it's well within the public consciousness that PFI is hospitals. But funny thing is, I don't think people realise. Maybe there's something in about prisons and about roads. I didn't realise that PFI had touched beyond hospitals and schools and gone into other sectors. So I think this is like one of those things. The more we delve into it, the more people delve into it. But then the military, if it's military stuff, military guys are duty bound not to say anything. They can't go on strike and things like that. It's interesting with military and the police, isn't it? That there's a very different set of rules for them. So they're very hamstrung. They don't even need no disclosure agreements to be hamstrung, don't they? But certainly, I'm disappointed. I'm actually really disappointed that nobody's had. I suppose the Meg Hillary said it twice, or for credit where credit's due. But where's Bridget Phillipson calling for more PFI when it was quite clearly obvious that it was going to be a problem? And I think
Yeah.
she needs to be held accountable to that. And I couldn't care less what political party. If she was my own political party, but saying exactly the same thing. What were you doing? What were you doing to your local community? Now she could say, "Well, great, well, fantastic. We're doing the best for our local community by building these schools. Great. But then your job is to make sure those contracts, aren't you? And that's
Yeah.
the second part of this. Fine, okay, get yourself into a mortgage, build these schools. But make sure then that the money doesn't get filtered out of the UK system, and then make sure those contracts are
Well, here's a question.
reciprocated.
Can I ask you this just from a kind of school's point of view? If a PFI company, if it was agreed that a school was going to if a school was going to be built under one of these contracts, isn't there responsibility on the governance of the school as well to kind of do some checks and balances on this, so they can maybe project forward and say kind of ask those questions about where will we be in 10, 15, 20 years time. What kind of assurances do you give us on this contract that you are going to be able to maintain it, you are going to kind of do this, and can we have some clauses in this contract if you aren't doing this?
Yeah.
Who is helping the schools actually deal
Well,
with
look,
yeah.
I'm going to go there, and I'm going to say something now, and I'm going to say it because I'm honest. We're follow the money, follow the money, and politics is a murky business. We've seen the VIP fast lane. We've seen how things operate in this country. We've seen what you know, who you know, and lobbying happens, doesn't it? Lobbying happens. Like every other industry, I can tell you I've had lots of campaigning and been up against organizations when I've realized who pulls the strings and who makes the things, who greases the wheels and makes the wheels go round. And I hate saying that, but let's ask that question. How is somebody, either somebody's asleep at the wheel, or watch this, and fair play to Jim McMahon, Oldham West, Jim McMahon. So I don't know which political party Jim McMahon is. I think he's Labour. I'm not too sure. I think he's actually maybe Conservative. A company that oversees management at Oldham school buildings where kids were left shivering with no central heating last week is paying out millions of pounds to shareholders. And the Oldham MP has claimed. Oldham West and Wrighton MP Jim McMahon told Parliament that the infrastructure group, the name, I won't mention the name, dished out £80 million of shareholder dividends since taking over the contract at Newman College. And Catholic College, through the company, denies these claims. Speaking at Education's question session, Ms McMahon said, when it comes to funding of schools, shouldn't the government follow the money? Hi. There we go. Hello, Jim. Yeah, you're speaking my language. Infrastructure, who owns Newman College, took out £80 million shareholder dividends at a time when it owned the PFI in school. But the heating system doesn't work. The roof is leaking, affecting 30 classrooms, and now 2 temporary classrooms have to be built to accommodate the pupils. Will the government intervene and say to the provider, if the money is there to take the dividends, where's the money to fix the roof? And it was built in 2011 using a PFI. And it has no control over the way the repairs are dealt with, claims the head teacher, Glyn Potts. So fair play to Jim McMahon. So there's another MP, and I honestly don't know which political party Jim McMahon. Somebody can look it up, please.
he's
But there he is.
he's Labour, but the kind of cooperative side of Labour.
I don't care what side he is. He's actually standing up for his local. Well, if he's Labour, he's standing up for his local constituents. But at the same time, it was his government's policy, and Bridget Phillipson was arguing for the very thing in 2011. Hold on, 2011, Bridget Phillipson was arguing to build PFI. That school was built in 2011. So there you go. Congratulations. Tell her what you won. As useful as somebody winning bullseye and getting a speedboat from Sheffield, you know what I mean? That's what you got yourself. I always loved that, the way they always got a speedboat and they're landlocked.
Yeah.
What was the 80s references today, aren't they?
Yeah. Right.
Have this one. And this one, I want to finish with this one.
So I just wanted to kind of start wrapping up, Brent. We've only got like a few minutes left, and you'll be pleased to know AI has created the Ballad of Brent Poland in an Irish folk kind of style.
I like this.
So I thought that might be a bit of a kind of light relief tonight after a kind of heavy.
Should we mention our sponsor first before we
Yeah,
go?
go on. Say hello to John.
Oh, you want me to? Good, because my voice is I'm getting huskier and huskier as I go along. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Cat Educational, and they publish professional development books and resources and support teaching and learning in schools here and around the world. So please check out their latest releases. You can also use our code for 20% off, and that is JCTTR2324. So that's code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. So please don't miss out on that. And you can also visit them at johncatbookshop.com, and that's 2 T's in John Cat as well, to explore the full range of titles and advance your own CPD, or professional development as we call it. Please read happily. I get my email every week from John Cat. I'm sure that when I open my inbox of my week off, I will have something from John Cat to have a look at. And I do have a little browse. They've got such a really good, diverse bunch of books, and they're a really good publisher as well. And we're quite lucky to have them as our sponsor as well. So please give them a visit and use our code as well. I'll repeat JCTT or 2324 for 20% off. So let's listen to. Thanks for listening tonight as well. We play out with the thing, and I'm sorry if I monologue tonight, but the more I went through that, I think I'm definitely going to do some more about this. Now I've started digging into this. It ticks my boxes of sense of injustice, unfairness, and something I think needs to be very much highlighted, because I think the point you're making is very valid. There's a lot of problems could be resolved with a lot of money being filtered out in education. And if that money is, as the government says, is spending a record amount of money, great. Well, let's make sure that record amount of money goes to the right places, for the right people, for the right children, for the right reasons, for the right cause. And I think that's a problem, is that the resources need to be better allocated within, because from the sounds of it, there is something in what's going on in education that is rotten. And this PFI scheme, and fair play to, again, Branwen and John and Tom's for breaking that. But you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So the Ballad of Brent Poland. Here we go.
In the land of rolling hills and green, there lived a man named Brent. With fiery passion in his heart, on the airwaves he was sent. A talk radio star with a voice bold and pure. He captivated listeners, his words they love to hear. Oh, Brent Poland, know you have the gift of gab. With your tales and stories, you've become a true folk fan. On the dial, we tune in to hear your wit and charm. Brent Poland, the talk radio legend on our farm.
I love the lyric at the end. I don't know if you heard that. Brent Poland, the talk radio legend on our farm.
Mary and Sweet Joseph, my ma, I love that.
I'll upload it onto Twitter for everyone to kind of
sing. Playing on local radio. It's almost, that's not country and western, mate. That's like,
it's kind of a storytelling Irish folk.
Oh no, it's like Daniel O'Donnell has risen from the grave.
Yeah.
You got to do one for the prof. You would love that as well. Paul. Paul's not on tonight as well. So yes, Sunday. Don't forget Sunday. We've got the weekly review at 10 o'clock, and Monday night again is Nathan's fantastic show with Dr. Fisher, which they're going to discuss lots of issues around attendance and the psychology of attendance and what's happening to our children. So that should be quite an interesting discussion. So tune in for that one as well. And of course, you can get this back on anywhere you can listen to your Spotify, your Podbean, and it'll be uploaded for 30 days. So if you want to listen to the timeline of the PFI scandal. So thank you and good evening, everybody. And if you're on a half term, enjoy the rest of your half term. If you're not, then good luck tomorrow.
Thanks. Cheers, Brent.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.